Hi and welcome to Thriver TV, the place to break free from narcissistic abuse with quantum tools and understandings. Today's Thriver TV show is really important because one of the most painful and frustrating and complicated things about narcissistic abuse can be the triggers that we experience. And a lot of people say to me things like, when are the triggers going to stop? Things like when I see a car that looks like his or her car, or I'm out in everyday life and just I'll see something. I'll see somebody that looks like my ex, or somebody who wears something that's the same as my ex, or something by association, and then these massive triggers go off. And it really is the most horrible, terrible feeling. And I know what it's like because it happened to me too. With narcissist number one, the triggers were just huge. I had complicated post-traumatic stress disorder through the roof. I had agoraphobia. And if I was out in life, it was always like if somebody had a similar haircut, or they wore a red t-shirt, which was the same as his t-shirt, or somebody who had something, anything, it didn't matter, anything at all, that by association, it was like, oh my God, it was horrible. And of course, the car thing was terrible. At that time, he had a black ute. It was a very, very popular ute in Australia. And I'd be on the lookout or seeing this car everywhere. And, you know, like something like that would give me a setback for days. I'd be just totally traumatized. Whether or not it was his car, it didn't matter. And I lived in a really close proximity to him. He was only 5 minutes up the road. So there was always that fear and that terror of what if I run into him? But you know, it wasn't a logical location thing, because what happened was I could be anywhere, literally anywhere. And I remember at one time I was at a family birthday. I was up the hills, which was miles and miles away, somewhere where he wouldn't normally go. And I walked into this restaurant with the family, and from the back there was this man who had similar shoulders, similar bald patch, small bald patch. The ex-narc could be horrified about hearing that if he ever watched this video, but yeah, you had a bald patch. So there was a bald patch at the back, and you know, his haircut. And I had a meltdown. It was just, you know, that surge of that ice running through your veins, the cortisol, the adrenaline, you know, all of that stuff. And the man turned around and it wasn't my ex. But I was traumatized for the whole family event, and I actually had to go outside and sit in my dad's car and forfeit it because I just couldn't cope. So, you know, when we're having triggers like that, it's not logical. And what we think to ourselves is, when am I going to get over this? When am I going to be free? When am I going to be able to relate to life and be in life and enjoy life ever again? Because I feel like I'm in my own prison with these triggers always going off. And when that was happening to me, I'd go to abuse forums and I'd check in and think, well, am I the only one? And all these people were saying, no, we have horrible triggers too. And the reports in there were, well, this is going to go on for a long, long time. You know, there were some people 10, 15 years down the track saying they still get triggered. And really the consensus was that you had to somehow learn how to live with these triggers and manage these triggers. And people were saying, well, you know, eventually, you know, we hope it'll get better. But for me, time wasn't healing it. It wasn't healing it. And I was losing the battle of trying to manage my triggers, which I know a lot of you out there feel like you're struggling with as well. And things got so bad for me, the agoraphobia, that my life was getting more and more reduced. I'd succumbed to getting people to do my groceries for me. I was pretty much a hermit within my own house, within my own safe zone, because as soon as I'd walk out my front door, it'd be like I felt like life was just going to attack me with these triggers, and that they were coming from everywhere. And I didn't understand at the time just how much is actually stored in our subconscious mind. How much happens in our subconscious in that we have 40 million bits of information going on in our subconscious. And what that really means is that when we have, oh my goodness, this is worse than Tiggy. Oh my God! This is Harry.
Hello.
I knew he wouldn't be able to contain himself. This is for everybody who knows Harry, who's the support team or half of it. Harry. This isn't Tiggy standing there going, you've completely upstaged me. That was a trigger, right? Because he was behind there the whole time.
Look at him.
Look at Tiggy. He's like,
What's going on? He's triggered.
He's triggered. He's triggered. He's like, he's peeved. He's like, how dare you
upstaged.
Upstaged. So.
Hello, everybody out there. Anyway, I'm off.
You want? Okay. Bye. Go back and play with Tiggy.
Jeez, what are you doing? Come on.
I knew it. See. This is why I never wanted to film with Harry around. But. Okay, you can, enough Harry. We need to get back to Thriver TV.
Right, sorry.
Okay, good. So what I didn't realise with triggers is that so much of it is subconscious. So in our subconscious, we have 40 million bits of information being processed per second, as opposed to our conscious mind, which is only 40 bits of information per second. So what that means is we have a lot of triggers going on that are actually beneath our conscious recognition. So, you know, look, just as an example, you know, maybe one of your most horrible arguments was somewhere where there were yellow tiles and on the wall, and then you're in a place where you see yellow tiles and you're triggered with cortisol and adrenaline, and you don't even know why. You can't make the connection logically, but your subconscious has, by association, triggered back into that trauma again. So we're trying to survive these triggers, and we're trying to live with them constantly. And you know, if we've been very traumatized, it's really, really horrible. And for myself, what happened was it was just getting worse and worse and worse for me. And I was eventually told, after I had a complete psychotic and adrenal breakdown, that the only way that I would ever be able to manage the triggers would be to have antipsychotics, which fortunately I refused, and I found a different way. And the way that I found to heal from this is what I share with thousands of people now and help them get beyond and heal completely past their triggers. And you may have seen last week's video that I did, which was Shifts Happen, which was with the lovely Susie. And you saw the process of up-leveling and how we go to our wounds and we release them, and then we bring in a true self reality to replace that wound. And I'm going to love the opportunity of working with somebody specifically on this topic, which is our triggers, so that you can get to see in real time how we can shift out of traumas that are actually the trigger inside us, so that when the event comes, or the association comes from the outside, that there's no longer a corresponding wound within us that's triggered. And that's when these things start becoming very, very benign to us. And when we're working the Thrive, now Tiggy's coming. He's coming in here now. He's like, how dare he upstage me? So when we're working in the Thrive way, we have the quantum understanding that our triggers are actually there for a reason. They're not just random, horrible events that we've got to try and survive. And what we understand is once we get to the bottom of what is triggering off in our body, so we're actually taking a lot less of the focus from off there, and we're bringing it into here. And by doing that, we're saying, well, I'm no longer going to try and control my environment, which is actually impossible. and generally we've got to just hide out from our environment because we can't control our environment. I'm actually going to work with what's going on inside of my body rather than trying to change my environment. And then it's really interesting because when we actually do that, what happens is our environment shifts as if by magic. So for example, when I used to be triggered constantly by narcissist number 1, living within 5 minutes of myself, I was constantly running into him in the most ridiculous, crazy, synchronistic ways. And we can very much argue law of attraction was at work because of the trauma. The fear of running into him was so great that I was constantly running into him. But yet what happened is when I became free of the wounds inside me that were being triggered, I never ran into him anymore. Even, I was yinging, he was yanging. We were on a different vibrational frequency and he didn't come into my space anymore. And it's like that old saying that when you're no longer afraid of walking under ladders, what happens is the ladders will be gone in your path. Because it was only when I actually had no fear of running into him at all, it felt very benign in my body, that I never did. And then later down the track, there were a couple of occasions where I did, where I was actually walking, one actually happened only about 6 months ago, where I was walking down a party in Frankston and he was walking opposite me and past me, and I was all sort of rugged up and it was like, winterish and quite cold. And he didn't see me, I saw him. And by the time I got to the next pavement, I'd even forgotten about it. It was just like, okay, don't look, head down, keep walking, why would you bother? And then I was like off on my life again. So what a stark difference to, being, completely catatonic for a week after those events. That's how I used to be. So the quantum understanding is that we cannot, if we've got a trigger inside us, it actually means that we've got a wound inside us that is being triggered, and the people in our lives that are posing as abusers are actually angels in disguise at the deep, profound quantum soul level, who have entered our lives to make our unconscious wounds conscious by hitting them hard so that they come up for us so that we can actually heal them. Now, the problem has been that we've all been conditioned and programmed to ignore them, push them away, self-medicate them away so that we run from our triggers. We try to shut our triggers up. We try to get them to go away instead of coming to them with love, devotion, and being super present to say, well, here is an underdeveloped, unhealed part of myself from my childhood or my ancestral wounding that I can actually heal now. And the quantum understanding, the Thrive Away, is we get that. And we go, okay, here's that trigger. I'm going to go to it. I'm going to find it. I'm going to load it up. I'm going to heal it and release it. And I'm going to up level to a new reality. Then I'm not going to have a trigger. And that's when it all gets very, very benign. It's a beautiful, happy day when you see the identical car or even their car going down the road and you go, oh, that's interesting. Okay, or you just don't even notice, or you notice and there's nothing in your body triggering off. That's when you know that you have up-leveled. It was like a time after I up-leveled, I walked onto a rooftop bar. There he was sitting with his kids. I was with a girlfriend. There was no trigger. It's just like, oh, he's here. And I just said, look, let's just leave and go next door. What was the point? There was no point being there. And that's what we did, and just got on with the evening, and I just didn't even think about him after that, which was a far cry from my past where I would have been catatonic for a week after that. So there's just a huge difference between when we do the work in our body and when we don't. Because when we don't, it could be, time doesn't heal this. It could be 10, 20 or 30 years down the track, and the powerlessness and the helplessness and the trauma has become chronic. And our inner identity has positioned itself as a trauma victim, and all of our life has been about trying to survive that trauma in our body and to be able to try and minimize it or or quieten it down or avoid the triggers, and we're not really truly living in life. We're not expanded, we're not free, and it's just incredibly painful to be like that. So how can we work with it consciously? How do we try and manage consciously? How do we try to control our environment? How do we try to control what's going on in our body, that cortisol and that adrenaline, which so much of it is coming through subconscious triggers that we've got no control over, just like we've got no control over our environment. We can't. The truth is we cannot manage it consciously, and so many people try to do that. The only way that we can manage it is to heal it, and to heal it means that we do the work in our subconscious on it, which is to do with our childhood traumas and our wounds. That's where we do the work. So I'm going to give you a little reenactment of how that's done, and I don't have any triggers from abusive exes or anybody, because my constant life is, if I have triggers, I up level them every day. I don't live with triggers in my body. I don't see the point. So but this reenactment would be if I did, to give you an idea how this works. So let's just say I saw something and I got a trigger in regard to an ex. And what I would do is I would say, okay, well, where am I feeling this in the body? And let's say it's like a kick to the solar plexus, like a real shock. And I would take myself, excuse me, nearly need to cough. I would take myself inside into my solar plexus, and I'd ask that part of myself, how old are you? And I'm there with super devotion. I'm present with love. I'm there with the intention to help this part and heal this part of myself. I'm self-partnering. I'm self-soothing. And I listen for the answer, and it might be, let's say, 18 months old. Now, my conscious mind doesn't remember what went on at 18 months old, but my subconscious is the vault of all knowledge. And this is what our intuition is about. And when we trust, we just trust. And I'm going to say to my 18-month-old self, what is this about? And let's say the feeling that comes up that translates when I'm getting used to doing this in my body. And the feeling is I'm going to be annihilated. That's the belief. Because at 18 months old, there was something that happened, a trauma, where that 18-month-old felt like she wasn't going to be able to survive. Or it could be a belief that it's not safe to be myself, that other people are going to punish me, that I'm not safe in life, could be a huge one. So we have these original traumas that are in our bodies. We might have taken these on from abuse survivors in our ancestral history, or we might have had an ancestral history of people that have gone through situations in life that are incredibly catastrophic. And we have literally taken on the energy out of their DNA that has been passed into us. This is how this stuff works. So when we're carrying a trauma, it's about the original trauma. We think it's about the abuser, but it's not. They're a reenactment. They're a continuation of the pattern. So what happens is when we load up and we release the trauma and we bring in the true self replacement on it, we get that body shift. We no longer have the trauma. And that's exactly the work that I was doing on Thriver TV with Susie last week. So when that happens, the trauma, rather than trying to manage it, we just don't have it anymore. And that's when when you just don't have those triggers anymore, and you can address every trigger one after the other after the other. And when you track it, you'll always find an original wound that trauma is related to. Then it goes, and then what happens is the person that's bringing the pattern doesn't affect you. There's no trigger, there's no fear of that person, there's no longing, there's no pining for, there's no obsession. All of it's gone. So that's the freedom, that's the up level, and it means that we're not just free of the abuser, we're actually more expanded and free and powerful in life than we've ever been in our life, because we are totally free to be ourselves, and we are not living the fearful beliefs of I'm not safe anymore. That's what's been going on. So I would love somebody in the community, I'm going to publicly put it out there for any NARPer who's already working NARP, who says, I want to work on, I'm still getting triggered. I really want to release that trigger. Please put your hand up. I would love to do this in real time, really demonstrate this to the community. And you're going to get your trigger removed. I'm going to really show you and help you with how to do that. So also to come over to the blog and let's have a conversation about all of this. So that's it from me until the next episode. You know what to do. Keep smiling, keep healing, and keep thriving, because there is nothing else to do. Lots of love. Bye-bye.